Passive House Northwest is extremely fortunate to have Eric Corey Freed presenting his presentation today. Those few of you who don't know of Eric, his CV is just vast and impressive. But some of the highlights to point out is that he has been the vice president of ILFI, the CCO of Eco Districts. He has authored over 11 books and has been named one of the 10 most influential architects working today. Eric's presentation today is entitled Wisdumb, which he swears is in a draft form, but we all watching this were extremely impressed and inspired by this work. Thank you, Eric, and everyone enjoy. A special thank you to the sponsors of this particular video: Small Planet Supply, 475 Building Supply, Weber Thompson, Glow European Windows and Doors.
Hello, everybody. Sorry we can't all be together in person and hug each other and spread germs and everything, but who knew that a global pandemic would stop all of that from happening? I'm really glad that the conference pulled this together and we were able to still share information and knowledge. I think now it's probably more important than ever. And I would love to see all of you, except that it could potentially kill us. So it's probably a good thing that we're doing this remotely. It's also, this is the first presentation I've ever given in 30 years where I'm in sweatpants. I don't know if you can see this, but I kind of like it. I think this is going to be my thing now, wearing sweatpants. For those of you who don't know, I'm an architect, and my entire career has been focused on sustainability. But also I have a new job that I got recently at Canon Design. And the reason that I chose to work for Canon was because they're one of the top 15 firms in the world, but also they said you can essentially control the 15 million square feet a year that we build and make it better and make it greener. And they have offices all over the country. So it's given me incredible opportunity to really put into place the things that you and I talk about all the time. So the point I'm trying to say is kind of a big deal. That's kind of, if you didn't gather that right away. Okay. It's a bizarre time. And I think things that I say today might become obsolete by tomorrow, given what's going on. And I don't even know why I'm here, frankly. I don't know how Scott talked me into this. I do know that the only reason that I really agreed to do this is because they now have face masks that work with my Face ID on my phone. So, I figured give it a shot, right? What I'm going to show you today is a new talk, and it's a little uneven. And normally my talks, I like to have a narrative. I like to have a beginning and a middle and then eventually an end. And this is going to be more like a Tarantino film, if you know what I mean. It's going to be a little weird, but what are you going to do? You're stuck at home anyway. Tough crap. You have to listen to me anyway. So, and I want to start with something that's affected me greatly in the last few months. And I think probably affected you, which is this teenager, Greta. When she was 15 years old, she had this idea that she would start a climate strike, that she would take off every Friday to protest her government's inaction for climate change. And she started as a party of one. And in less than 13 months later, that grew to 4 million people worldwide. And I know you know this. And I know you know that I know that you know this. But what is it about this person? We've had activists before. We've had champions before. We've had celebrities even. What about this 15, now 17-year-old girl caught our attention and imagination? And then I saw her address the United Nations. And it affected me deeply. And hopefully you'll be able to hear this, because all of this is an experiment, but hopefully you can hear this. And I know most of you have probably seen this shared on Facebook and Twitter and so forth, but I want to play it now in the context of us being together and talking.
I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
So that was the line that got me, that all you can talk about is money and eternal economic growth, fairy tales of eternal economic. That got me. I've heard this 100 times now, and it still gives me chills. And I don't know why. Is it because I see myself in this girl? Is it because I have a daughter that's not that far away from this age? Is it because I know that when this girl and my daughter are my age, the world is going to be a very different place? I don't know. But I know that it's affected me and it's affected all of you. And there's something in me that wanted to share that with all of you. Just it makes me feel better with us sharing it together, even virtually. Later that day, while she was at the UN, Donald Trump dropped by for 15 minutes, and the cameras caught her face as he walked in the room. And she would be a terrible poker player, obviously, because you can feel and see everything that she's feeling right now. And Trump, being the person he is, of course, couldn't let it go. And he had to tweet about it. Oh, she seems like a very happy young girl looking forward to a bright and wonderful future. So nice to see. And Greta, being the person that she is, made it her avatar on Twitter and just totally took it over, which is really the perfect way to deal with a bully, I think. And so there's something about her that's different. And I don't know what it is. I can't explain it, but it gives me something that I hadn't felt in a long time, which is hope, which is amazing. So what I want to share with you today is how I am building on that. And I'm building on it in that I am now sustainability director of a large firm, one of the largest in the country, if not the world. And how do I implement change in a big ship where they tell me that we can't change quickly? And the official title for this talk is what I call Wisdumb, D-U-M-B, because it's really talking about all the conventional wisdom and all the mindless mindsets that are a roadblock and obstacles for us to do our work. Because that's really what we're selling here, is we're selling innovation. We're selling change management. You're not selling lead. You're not selling passive house. I mean, those are our tools. But really what we're selling is a grander vision for something better. We're selling innovation. And companies struggle with innovation. These companies were thought of as innovative at one time, but for various reasons, they dropped the ball. They became complacent and they failed to continue to innovate. And as a result, we have a graveyard of potentially cool things that were some of my favorite things ever that are now not innovations anymore. Companies that probably people younger than 20 have never even heard of. But people know how innovation works. You've seen companies innovate. You see it all the time. Apple had a device called the iPod Shuffle and the iPod Nano. They were at their peak of their popularity. They were selling millions of units a month. And Apple said, we've found something better. Any other company, the conventional wisdom would be, let's keep milking that. Let's keep selling that until it just exhausts itself. Apple, at the peak of its popularity, said, we found something better. Let's drop it. And they upset a lot of people, but it didn't matter because they gave us something better. And that's what we need to do with buildings. The history of buildings is the history of technology. Whether we fail to recognize that or not, it's true. Think about it. Architecture is a reflection of the zeitgeist of the technology of the time. Whether it's stacking up stones to create pyramids, or whether it's creating post and beam temples, first out of wood, and then after they burn, then building them out of marble, it's really a story of technology. This was the highest technology at the time. This technology then evolved into Gothic arches, and then eventually buttresses, spanning, making stone dance, for lack of a better word, due to technology. This became then bubbles upon bubbles of Byzantine beauty, essentially. And then we invented new materials and new technologies, and the discovery of iron led to crystal palaces, and then eventually skyscrapers. The history of architecture is the history of technology, but our history has slowed. We kind of peaked. And now we're in this thing of mass production, and we're seeing kind of iterations on a theme. There are people doing amazing things with fabrication, right? I mean, I myself, we're obsessed over this, right? How can we use fabrication to make things better, faster, stronger, healthier, smarter? But these advances in fabrication have not led to advances in materiality, and we're still using the same materials just in kind of more clever ways. So we're in need of an innovation. And the way that we brainstorm, the way that we work in teams, the way that we deliver projects does not give us a system that's conducive to innovation. It's conventional thinking holding us back once again. I'll give you an example. How many of you have stayed in a meeting that were bored out of your mind and wanted to leave, but didn't because of a sense of duty. That's conventional wisdom. That's holding us there. And instead, what we need to adopt is an innovation change management strategy. Remember, behind every crazy idea, every wrong decision, thank you, is a closely held assumption of conventional wisdom that seemed smart at the time, right? And so we're following this conventional wisdom, we're getting to these dumb ideas, which in hindsight we can see as failures. Remember, every single disaster movie you've ever seen has been a scientist saying, we need to do something differently. We need to innovate and change. And some politician usually saying, well, the conventional wisdom says this. And then, of course, disaster. You've seen movies, right? You know what I'm talking about. Listen, there's times when conventional wisdom makes a lot of sense, where conventional wisdom is helpful even, right? Wait an hour after you swim. Never eat an egg salad sandwich from a gas station. I get it. That's good conventional wisdom. When ordering a call girl in Vegas, always get a receipt for tax purposes. All good conventional wisdom. But there are times when conventional wisdom holds us back. And you all are in the breaking of conventional wisdom business. Really, if you think about it. How many of you have been in an office and been freezing? Do you know why? It's because the office standards that we used are based on white men in the 1950s. That's true, right? So all of our standards around human comfort are based on Don Draper, essentially. Which doesn't really apply. How many of you have found your cabinets are too high? Turns out that those are based on tiny little Swedish ladies from the 1800s. I don't know if you knew that. That's not really true. And then how many of you have been to a hotel and found the toilet paper way too far away? That's not even based on a standard. They're just messing with you now. That's basically what's happening. All of that is conventional wisdom. all of that is what I call wisdom. It's this idea of something's supposed to be a certain way, and it's not really. Because we've been designing our buildings the same way for 200 years now, based on a set of assumptions that are no longer really true, if you really think about it. And the worst part is that none of this is a surprise to anybody. Where we are now, this was the plan. We're not victims here. This was the plan. Let's make an oil-based, fossil fuel-based, car-based culture and design everything around that. That was the plan. That's what we meant to do. And the last 75 years of policy have all been geared towards that. We didn't realize that in doing that, of course, it would make our planet uninhabitable. But as a result, where are buildings a success? They fail in terms of energy and health and water and waste and resources and cost. And except for you guys who found ways to make them work, the majority of buildings are not that at all. They are failures. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying conventional wisdom is holding us back. What we're really fighting is this. This idea that things need to be a certain way. Let me show you how conventional wisdom appears in our like this. This is not what you'd call a good user experience, is it? How many times do you think for the next 20 years your client is going to have, is this it? Is this the one? Is this, oh no, it's this one. How many times do you think that's going to happen? And because of this, we do things almost on autopilot now in conventional wisdom, and we don't even step back and see the larger picture. And then nobody ever questions it or looks at it or says, oh God, that seems off. And then as a result, the quality of the work just suffers and nobody takes any care in it. And then we just do these things that just don't make any sense, that like, who's that for? Some of you might not get this joke right away. It's fine. And these are everywhere in our buildings where we're just on autopilot. We just follow the conventional wisdom. And I'm like, isn't that a problem? I saw this the other day. And it was, is this the suggestion of stairs? Is it messing with you? Then I saw this one in another building. Is this not really a fire? Am I safe? And my favorite one was this one, was because he's sleeping. I mean, he's sleeping, so the quotes are justified, I think. But this conventional wisdom just gets into everything that we do, and we just start doing things that aren't really helpful to people. It's like, who are you benefiting here? And then as a result, when you arrive at places and you're like, who's that for? And then I thought, do they just have these signs everywhere I look? Because technically it's true. Everywhere I look, I am here. And now we're seeing conventional wisdom start to actually be dangerous or harmful to us, and people just gang in because everybody else is doing it, might as well too. Like you see what I'm saying? We're doomed is basically what I'm saying. By the way, conventional wisdom can change. We have examples throughout history of where the conventional wisdom was one thing, and then suddenly, 18 months later, it changed. That's the way it works. But that's what we need to do with our buildings. I oversee 1,200 employees and their sustainability strategies. And I ask them, what's one of the first questions is, what is your structural system? And the answer is usually like, I don't know, steel stud. And I go, why? And they don't have an answer. And then I say, well, what's your spacing? I don't know, 16 inches on center. What else? Well, why? Did you know we can switch it to 24? Did you know we can make the walls thicker? We can, turn it from an R13 to hopefully an R19 or an R30 just by being smarter. I can strip 33% of the steel out of it. And so it's that level of thinking, that complacency, that conventional wisdom that gives us this. This is a demonstration of something that should not exist, but does. And if anything, it's a testament to humanity's just ingenuity, I guess, just through brute force, getting to get things to work in a place that's not fit. Conventional wisdom is what gets us things like this. And it's like, that's probably going to be a problem. I don't know. And people want to break that. They don't know that's what they want to do. That's what I mean when I say you're not in the sustainability business, you're in the innovation business. And this is our opportunity. This is our chance to grow sustainably for the future. My firm does a lot of healthcare. That's right. It's one of the things that we do. We have clients today that don't know if their buildings will be obsolete in just 3 years. But yet they're building them because they think they're supposed to. So we're trying to raise those issues with them of, if you don't know if the building's going to be obsolete in 3 years, how do we plan for that? And we're starting to put in these weird, crazy innovations of things they never would have considered before, simply because they have this kind of externality of facing them. If you think about home building, for example, we couldn't possibly build enough buildings fast enough, cheap enough, or abundant enough to meet demand. And so, if anything, out of fear, we're just following the conventional wisdom. Or take resiliency, for example. We don't possibly know how unprepared we are, which we are, for what's facing us. And we can't count on luck that hopefully the tornado will just go around us. It doesn't work that way. We got a lot of problems facing us, and problems call for innovation. Let me give you a sense. This is the bad news part, by the way. We have about 1.6 million people added to cities every single week. All told, it's 92 billion square meters that we need to build in the next 15 years. 15 years is going to go like that, by the way. This is an opportunity to transform that 92 billion square meters into something else. At the same time, that is facing us, the urbanization and the need for building. At that same time, the United Nations tells us that we only have about 60 harvests left until the soil degrades so much that we can't grow any more food. I know, I'm a bummer. I know that. The projections from the UN are even bleaker. They predict that by 2050, there are going to be 200 million climate refugees worldwide. And by the way, climate refugees don't look like what you think in the movies. Climate refugees are people like you and I unable to live where we're living because of flood and heat wave and drought and tsunami and all the other things. They're going to look like everybody else. To give you a sense of scale, 200 million was the entire world population at the peak of the Roman Empire. I mean, it's a lot of people. And this is where we are today. This is my computer fetching the chart from the Scripps Institute. This is the carbon levels as of this week, 414 parts per million. The last time carbon levels were this high, it was, first of all, 2 million years ago, and there were trees in the South Pole. So this is unprecedented. And more than half of that carbon has been exhaled into the atmosphere from the burning of fossil fuels just in the last 3 decades. So we've done all this damage knowingly, not in ignorance. Once it turned 2020, a few months ago, I decided to do kind of my own best of the decade type of thing. This is kind of what I do as a hobby, right? So kind of look at the decade in retrospective. 2010 to 2019, where'd we go, And it's pretty grim. Here's the decade in retrospective, right? If we look at the 10 hottest years on record, 5 of them occurred in the last 5 years. And in fact, that's just something we're going to have to say now because 2020 is not even over yet, but it'll probably be definitely one of the 5 hottest years on record. At the same time, 4 of the 5 largest wildfires in California happened in this decade, and eventually it'll be 5. 6 Category 5 hurricanes happened in just the last 4 years, tearing through the Atlantic region. We've seen Arctic sea ice cover drop to its lowest percentage ever, 13% down from where it used to be. All of our 100-year floods are now 5-year floods. By the way, that's not a flood that occurs every 100 years. That means in any one year, there's a 1% chance of it happening. Now there's a 20% chance of it happening. That's really what that means. And at the same time, we've had more $100 billion climate disasters than we've ever had before, double what it was the previous decade. In that same decade, by the way, we pumped out a record 40.5 billion tons of CO2 into the air. Again, doing more damage in ignorance than we ever did, or more damage knowingly than we ever did in ignorance. And so we're ending this decade on track to warm to a catastrophic 3.2 degrees Celsius of warming. Right now, we're at 1.25-ish or so. We're trying to keep it below 2. That's everybody's kind of agreed upon target. But nobody seems confident that we have the, let's say, discipline or goodwill to do it. So business as usual is going to get us there, and the world is going to be a very different place. You have to remember that with all these climate projections, all of my climate scientist friends have told me this, that they were being optimistic. All of their projections were hopeful because they didn't want to scare anybody too much. So they erred on the side of humanity will do the right thing. And boy, were they wrong, right? You see what I'm saying? Let me show you what I mean. Every single president since JFK has been made aware of the climate crisis. These are letters from 1961, and then there's one to Clinton in 97. Every single president since JFK has been made aware of this, and yet nothing's really been done. President Ford, remember him, said, we need inadvertent global climate modifications immediately. That was in 76. At the same time, this is a chart from ExxonMobil. This is from 1982. In 1982, they accurately predicted that our carbon levels would be about 415 parts per million in 2020. They really nailed it. Those guys are pretty smart. Holy crap. And at that time, Exxon did two things. They started a course for how they as a company can prepare for climate change. And the second thing they did was, how do we disinform the public so that way we're not to blame? And they started a disinformation campaign starting in the 80s that still goes on to this day. How do you change a company like that? What would a good Exxon even look like? It couldn't. I mean, unless they're going to start selling baby formula, I don't know what else they could do. I don't see how they have to cease to exist. And that idea that we're all going to get better, I don't know about you, but I feel like I've abandoned that idea. That idea that we're all going to become profoundly better people and want to be environmentalists. I don't know if you've looked around lately, but most people are douchebags. They're terrible people. And so I've given up on that strategy. Now let's force it on them. Let's just push it on all of them. Let's save the terrible planet with the terrible douchebags like we are. That's basically and there is no time to do this. We have to do this now. We've run out of time. I was in a meeting. This is true. I was in a meeting 2 weeks ago before the quarantine. And I won't say the organization, but the person in the meeting said, well, you know, our plan is to cut 80% of carbon emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. And I said, you know, it's March 2020, right? Like, you know. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you're late. You're basically, she'd been saying that bullet point for the last 10 years because that's what the marketing was fed to her. You know, we're going to do 80% reduction, and they just didn't do anything really. So that's why we need a change. But I know that change is difficult. I myself have undergone changes, as have you, right? For instance, I drive an electric car. Our house is completely off grid, right? We buy RECs and a mixture of renewables. We try not to eat meat anymore. Only chicken. I don't like chickens. Chickens are jerks. So we eat a lot of chicken, but no other meat. And we do other things. You know, we bring our bags to the grocery, typical Pacific Northwest type of stuff. And I have to tell you, after doing all these changes and everything, let me tell you, it's a huge pain in the ass. It's a really difficult thing. It's really hard. I get it. So I get why people fear change. I'm not offering change for change's sake. I'm offering change as an opportunity. Change doesn't mean that you're going to end up looking like this. I mean, if you want to, great, go for it. But really, I'm offering opportunity. And I think that if you're facing the climate crisis, something as insurmountable as that, it really falls into two buckets. You're either one of two types of people. Either you're the type that sees the science and you're, like me, scared of the science. Because that's where I am. I see the science, I see it, and I'm terrified. Or you're scared of the change the science indicates. I don't think there's really climate deniers. I think there's climate delayers. But I think it's because they're scared of the change that they think is going to come. And it turns out that our brain is wired not to innovate. It's actually part of our brains tell us not to do something unknown. It's a protection mechanism deep in our weird cave people, monkey brains. And so you're literally wired not to innovate. Your brain is trying to talk you out of it. And that's what I'm facing in the firm. Everybody in my firm and all of our clients that I talk to, they're excited about sustainability. They're all on board. But when it comes to actually changing what they do, they're like, you know what I mean? That's the way it works. So how do you innovate your way to a zero carbon world when our brains are telling us, stop it, don't do it, stop, get off, like basically at every turn? I read this book about, this is about the Cuban Missile Crisis, seemingly unrelated, called The Essence of Decision. And in it, the author says that the leaders weren't really seeking a course of action. They were seeking approval. They don't want advice. They just want approval. And I think that's how conventional wisdom pervades itself. There's a famous story, and a lot of you architects have heard this, when Sir Christopher Wren, who designed the St. Paul's Cathedral in London, a beautiful building, he was walking the grounds, touring the site during the construction. And he saw 3 different stonemasons. And he said to the first one, "What are you doing?" And the first guy said, "I'm cutting stone." I'm not going to do the accent, but you get the idea. And then he turned to a second one. He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm earning a wage." Is that a good English accent?
Perfect.
Yeah. And then he turned to the third one and he said, "What are you doing?" And the third one said, "I'm building a great cathedral." And from that story, you realize that's what you want. You want to instill a clear vision in everybody's head of getting everybody to strive to build that cathedral. You want to get buy-in from everybody. In other words, you have to choose innovation. You have to make innovation happen. That's my strategy with a firm of 1,200 people with 20 offices. I'm getting buy-in from different levels at different approaches because I want them all to realize the cathedral that we're all building together. Because it's not just about making green buildings today. It's about the green buildings of tomorrow that really could look like this.
Imagine modifying the DNA code of plants to grow living buildings. We can revolutionize construction, architecture, and gardening, creating entire cities out of living organic material.
You have to choose a future like that. Innovation doesn't just happen. It's not going to, and it's certainly not going to happen given the way that we normally run our firms, right? It's just not going to happen. Our current conventional wisdom relies on a set of these unspoken understandings that we all kind of comply to, but we're all really bad at. Really involving feedback loops and communication that we're really not, as humans, not really good at. And then I read this quote that the level of conformity in any organization is really in inverse proportion to its creative ability. So the more you embrace conventional wisdom, the more you're unable to really address innovation in any form. Think about it. If your job was to reinvent the wheel, aren't you immediately going to start thinking of, well, how do I make the wheel better? Instead of stepping back and asking the question, well, do we really need the wheel in the first place? Innovation requires a choice, and it requires you to kind of question the very being of what it is to be in a business, right? Like this apparently this is what this guy does. And I know innovation is scary. I get it. But the next time you're in a meeting and you think of an idea and you think, well, maybe somebody else will say it and I don't have to, or I don't want to say it and get laughed at, or I don't want to say it and have people, make fun of me. Just remember that at some point, somewhere in the world, somebody said, hey, you know what? Let's make a film with tornadoes full of sharks. And they did. They made that. So if that can happen, you can put forth any idea that you want. Innovation happens in weird ways. Sometimes there are things that I seem like a dumb idea to me, but people like. Sometimes there are things that I already know that I'm not going to want. Sometimes innovations are these things that they think are clever. Like, oopsie, we made a mistake, but they didn't really make a mistake. This is a marketing person, you know that. And then sometimes innovations come right when you need them most, I think, really. By the way, this is a funny story. I showed this last week to a buddy of mine in Wisconsin at a conference, the B4 conference in Wisconsin, and they immediately went out and bought they ordered it. They were thinking about it full time, and then they texted me this photo. That's my buddy Michael. Texted me the photo of dude that was incredible. Conventional wisdom also has its repercussions. You'll remember about 3 years ago, there was an incident on a United Airlines flight. The flight was oversold and overbooked, and following procedure and policy, it led to somehow a doctor being beaten and bloodied and dragged off the plane. And because all of us have HD video cameras in our pocket, we recorded this, right? How on earth could following policy end up with a beaten passenger? How does that make sense? In the weeks that followed, the CEO of United, Oscar Nunes, made it even worse with 3 different fumbled attempts at trying to control the situation. He was doing damage control, and at one point he even blamed the passenger, calling him disruptive and belligerent, which didn't really get people on his side. And as a result, United stock fell $1 billion in a week. Conversely, Southwest Airlines had its own incident almost exactly a year later. A piece of the engine broke off, smashed into a window, and a woman was sucked partially out of the plane. The passengers rallied together and held on to her as they made an emergency landing, but unfortunately she passed away. There were 144 passengers on that plane, and Southwest didn't try to do damage control. Their mission statement is, we love our passengers, and it's embedded in all of their DNA and everything that they do. The staff knows this. They didn't need approval. They didn't need permission. They didn't need authorization. 144 passengers were met by 144 Southwest employees who each grabbed one passenger and said, I am your sole point of contact. This is my cell phone number. If you're hungry, I'll get you food. If you're thirsty, I'll get you something to drink. And if you need counseling, I'll get you that too. But I'm not dealing with anybody but you, and I'm taking care of you. Their CEO didn't try to do damage control. Conversely, he went on the air, Gary Kelly, and he just said, this is what we've done, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what happens next. He didn't care about the repercussions. And Southwest Airlines didn't suffer at all because they were just trying to deal with their primary mission. We love and care about our customers. They led with empathy. And that's what you need to do to be innovative. If I make a bunch of flaming hoops for people to jump through, checklists and crazy things to get our buildings more sustainable, first of all, they won't do it. And secondly, my staff would hate me. But if I can teach them to lead with empathy, that's something. For the most part, we've built sustainability as a department over on the side, right? And every big firm has done this. And they all have their cute little web pages talking about their little sustainability departments off to the side. But it follows a model that I call if the client asks for it. Client comes in and says, hey, can I have a LEED building? Sure. Here's the department. Hey, can I have a passive house building? Yeah, absolutely. We have people over here. But other clients don't. And so this just follows that same pattern of the same old thinking produces crappy buildings. All these large firms keep telling me, I don't know what you're talking about. We have so many LEED APs on staff. We're designing to LEED Silver, but you're not, really. If you want innovation, design is about constraints. And what a better constraint than designing a building with a great envelope, with a low EUI, full of healthy finishes. Let's embrace those limitations. Let's make designs that respond to those limitations. And remember that our primary service is not delivering drawings or even delivering a building. Our primary service is delivering thinking. Thinking is our ultimate deliverable, especially if we're leading with empathy. That's what we need to be doing to get the true innovation we need. This is a glimpse. This is probably not going to make sense to many people, but this is a glimpse of the strategy that I'm rolling out at Canon Design. And you'll see it's fighting on all fronts. From the pursuit phase, through the shortlist, into the kickoff interview, through schematic design, through DD, through CA, all the way, including eventually post-occupancy. I'm fighting it on all fronts because I need to bake it into the DNA of everything we do. Why? Not because they asked me to, but more important, because we need to. The world has changed. 130 different banks with over 47 trillion in assets, and this is Deutsche Bank, Citigroup, Barclays, I mean, they're pretty big firms, have adopted unilaterally these UN-backed climate policies that shift their loan books away from fossil fuels. They're divesting completely from fossil fuels. New York set these new rules just recently, by the way, for its biggest emitters, and they're targeting buildings. Concrete is now in the sights of being emitted because of the embodied carbon that concrete represents. And now there are calls for people to just not use concrete in any of their projects whatsoever. And now that we've done that with concrete, they're doing it with steel now. In fact, concrete, steel, and aluminum are already probably about half to 85% of all your embodied carbon in your project, which is giving way to new technologies like mass timber. And we are in the mass timber capital of the world. I don't know if you realize that. And I know some of you are already working on these projects, and it's amazing. But this is happening everywhere. And I'm pushing for this on every discussion we're having on every project because I have to. Even under this administration, renewable investments have hit an all-time high for 2019, and they'll hit a new high in 2020. At the same time, the biggest carbon dioxide emitter in all of Europe, RWE, said that they're going carbon neutral by 2040. And the governor of the Bank of England warned that any business that's not addressing this, not addressing the climate crisis, is eventually going to go bankrupt. In other words, be obsolete. At the same time, Moody's, the credit rating agency, they bought a climate data firm because they see that's their future in terms of talking risk, preparing for that. So we need to talk about this. We can't follow that if the client asks for it approach. We need to basically come in and offer it to every client. This is Nikola Tesla. And in 1926, he unveiled a wireless vision for the world. Let me read it to you and see if it sounds familiar. We shall be able to communicate with one another instantly, irrespective of distance. Not only this, but through television and telephony, we shall see each other and hear one another as perfectly as though we were face to face, despite intervening distances of thousands of miles, and the instruments through which we shall be able to do this will be amazingly simple compared with our present telephone. A man will be able to carry one in his vest pocket. That was 1926, and now almost 100 years later, holy crap, he was right. It was perfectly right. So let's instill that vision in clients. Selling sustainability doesn't work because it follows this conundrum of good versus evil, right? I'll give you an example. Which is better, paper or plastic? Exactly. Well, plastic's made of plastic, and that's bad, but it's reusable, and that's good. But paper's made from trees, and that's bad or good. I'm not really sure. Oh, wait, the state decided for me, and they just banned plastic bags anyway, so now I have a reusable one. Is that better? Who knows? I don't know. I'll give you an even dumber one. Which is better for you? An apple a day keeps the doctor away, or don't eat the peel because it's full of pesticides. But the peel also has all the fiber, but it also has the pesticides. So what do I eat half the apple? What do I do? There is no good or bad here. It is a cloudy marketing message at best. And so you don't sell sustainability, you sell outcome. Remember, everything our parents told us was good for us actually turned out to be bad for us. Red meat, milk, college, all of that stuff is just bad. It's bad for us. And now we see it. I see it now with almond milk. I have friends mad at me because we bought almond milk. I'm like, well, it seems, no, dude, you got to be oat milk and it's got to be this, but from this brand and not this brand. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm out. Which probably explains why the cover of Maclean's in Canada was like this just a few months ago, which is, it could go either way, really. It's also the reason why we were able to ban straws, but not, I don't know, assault weapons. You know what I mean? Straws are bad. That's clear message. I've heard now, by the way, that, balloons are bad, but I'm sure as hell not going to be the person to ban them. I don't want to be that guy. So the process is imperfect. It's messy. It's supposed to be. These are the tools that I use to get that buy-in, insight. But the best one of all is just conversation, raising the issue, not waiting to be asked, participation. Remember, it's not about the ideas. The ideas are easy. Ideas are fun. I'll produce ideas all day. It's really about making them happen. That's when you got to pay me, right? Putting them into place. I'll brainstorm ideas with you all day. I don't care. But putting them in action, that's the hard part for all of us. And you're already good at that. That's the point. Your staff requires certain things to get innovation, right? Innovation requires faster communication, faster measurement, faster feedback loops, and a vision for what that looks like. But your staff specifically need room for the innovation, time to follow the innovation, and then believe it or not, they need rewards for that innovation. And if they're afraid to bring up ideas, you could even embrace it and say, let's have the dumbest idea of the week contest. And that goes to Scott for whatever, right? For wearing that shirt. But you can reward it in a fun way. But remember that our mission here is empathy, to get into our clients' shoes and in their heads and understand what they want. So I'm going to give you some tips of how to do that. First of all, I want you to start taking charge of the agenda, whatever that means. So at the first meeting, the kickoff meeting, or even just the interview, take hold of it. Don't just passively go along. But what we do is we invite the operations people into the meeting along with the capital people. So the checkbook people are hearing from the operations people who pay the monthly bills. And suddenly that spawns discussions around life cycle costing. It's surprisingly effective. And so if we're dealing with a healthcare organization or a university or whomever, they don't even know their own operations people. I mean, they know their name, but they've never actually met. And so we'll just take charge of that agenda and make it happen. Because this is what we're facing, basically. So we need this innovation. Now, 3D printing is going to get us some of the way there, maybe. Prefabrication will get us some of the way there, right? Automation hasn't quite yet, but it'll get us some of the way there. But what I'm really waiting for are the big future things. And we need to build sustainability into that because this is our future. By the way, there's a company now that does these adaptive floor plans that you drag and drop to the size and it'll automatically furnish the plan based on an efficient layout. It's kind of cool. So because of this, I'm adopting an innovation strategy. I'm going to show it to you. This is my new focus. I think I showed this to you last year at the conference too, but it's still true, which is first radical efficiency. And that we all know that one, right? We're good at that. Radical sufficiency, radical simplicity, radical electrification. Let's stop burning things inside buildings. That's really annoying. Radical decarbonization. Let's clear the air. And radical restoration. And by the way, this came about with an argument I had with Lloyd Alter, who's a friend of mine. You know, that little Canadian guy? And so he had started this conversation. We started arguing about it. So I give credit to him, really. But as I was looking at these 6, I realized that there's a 7th one, which is radical community. And if you do the first 6 right, it opens up opportunities for that. This is my focus. This is my goalpost, really. And so the last thing I want to share with you very quickly is this. These are the innovation agreements, I call them. And so far, there are 8 of them. And they're still a work in progress. And they come from my work with all of those cities and all of those organizations trying to get sustainability buy-in. And the first one is, you can't change a system that refuses to change. You need permission and you need authority to make the changes, and you need that up front. Second, you need to set the goal. You need to know your end game. You need to know where you're headed. So set a moonshot and think big, not 20% reduction over ASHRAE 90 point. Like, stop with that crap. Every building net zero, period. That's your goal, really, isn't it? Innovation number 3, you can make complex ideas very simple, not by trying to educate the client, but by leading with benefit, selling them on outcome, gathering buy-in. That's what we do. Don't sell them on lead. Sell them on the benefits that lead brings. Don't sell them on passive house. Sell them on the benefits that passive house brings them, right? And focus on the why before you get to the how. And I know you're a nerdy group. I know that. And you like the how. The how's exciting and you can't wait to talk about it. Well, that's why we have each other. With the client, you don't need to do that. Focus on the why, and you can avoid a lot of landmines that way. Trust me. Number 5, avoid the trap of language. I try not to use the word sustainability with clients anymore because it is such a loaded word with baggage and history. So sometimes we'll invent new words. That's even better. But at the very least, just be mindful of those words. And it's starting now a little bit with resilience, right? That's becoming a bit of a loaded word. So we're talking about, future-proofing. That's kind of a made-up word that we're using as an example. Number 6, balance the results. Don't just focus on the long term. Don't just focus on the short term, but kind of focus on a bunch of things because you got to keep them motivated throughout this process and really try to make it count. Number 7, don't just assume because something's broken that you need to throw it away. It could be fixed. It could be something simple, rather. But also don't be afraid to either. So wipe the slate, but within reason. And then lastly, adopt this mindset that for innovation, you kind of have to build it twice. When Apple was doing their first retail stores, they spent a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars to build essentially a prototype. And they mocked it up in real size. And Steve Jobs walked in and said, no, it's all wrong. Do it again. And he gave them notes. They had to go through that process to build it a second time and then get it right. It's part of their DNA. And now apparently it turns out that's kind of the way they do everything. It gives you pause to reassess and reevaluate over and over again. So just mentally prepare yourself for any innovation strategy, doing it, and then possibly having to do it again. And if you don't, great. And then as I mentioned, sell them on outcome. If you never mention sustainability again, that's a good thing. If you never mention lead again, that's a good thing. So what I've done is I've taken the liberty of putting together some outcomes for you as a starting point. Reduced absenteeism, higher worker productivity, boosting cognitive performance in students, higher real estate valuations, reduced operating costs. And we have multiple ways to get to these outcomes, but sustainability is the main one. And so I'm selling the client on this. And if I sell them on this, it'll bake it in the design phase, and then they'll be excited about it all the way through, right? Lead, they can value engineer out. They're not going to value engineer out the idea of reduced absenteeism or healthier staff. Because does anybody know what a client's favorite word is? Does anybody know?
No.
No, that's a client's favorite word is no. Hey, do you want a green roof? No. Hey, do you want this? No. Hey, do you want lead? No. That's a client's favorite word. If you know that's a client's favorite word, stop asking them yes questions. Don't say, do you want lead? But instead say, do you realize you're paying $40,000 a month in electricity? Do you want to keep doing that? No. Okay, then we're going to make it net zero. Don't ask them about sustainability. Hey, do you want to keep having employee sick days? We looked and actually your company has a higher rate than everybody else. Do you want to keep doing that? No. Okay, then we're going to fill the building with healthy finishes. Just throw it right back in their face, right? And if they ask you, well, I've heard net zero this or I heard passive house that, I'm going to give you a great 2-word tip. which is just, if they start complaining about it, I heard it was expensive or whatever, just say, oh, how many passive house buildings have you done? Because they're going to say, well, none. Oh, really? So you don't really know what you're talking about then? Is that what you're saying? Just benefit on your expertise. And granted, this will make them upset, but that's okay. But this phenomenon that we're not going to do something because of some potential backlash that may not occur, that doesn't seem likely, I call that phenomenon front lash. It's the opposite of backlash, and it just doesn't really make much sense to me. Okay. What I do know is that we need to change, and we need to break this cycle of conventional thinking. Green buildings cost more. You have to remember that the people that invented, the people that invented all these innovations that we benefit from today, they did it without the technologies that we have. It was not long ago that people used to read by candlelight, or horses were their primary form of transportation, or we wrote down things on paper with inky pens that smeared all the time, or that music came on these weird grooved discs. Or worse, that if you got a phone call, you had to be in the kitchen and there was a weird cord that went really long and it used to get tangled and everything. That wasn't that long ago. And so we're good at change. We can do change. It really wasn't that long ago that if you wanted to schlep all this stuff, you had to needed a truck, and now you basically have it in your pocket. That's kind of the point. That's what change does. That's what innovation brings. So what I want to leave you with, if we want to get to the point where we truly have regenerative growing buildings, we need to set an innovation strategy now. What we've done is we've set a moonshot for every single phase. You're welcome to these. You can make your own. But I want to leave you with 5 strategies right now that you can do for innovation. The first one is, as I already mentioned, control the agenda. Really do an emphasis on face-to-face interactions, not phone calls. At the very least, video chats, you can see them, but really controlling that agenda and inviting the right stakeholders into the room to get the outcomes that you want. 2, define what success looks like for the project. Not finishing it on time and on budget, that's assumed, but actually setting a big moonshot goal. 3rd, feel free to push back on the program. Their OPR, their BOD, their architectural program, whatever they're giving you, feel free to, at the very start, push back on it. We have clients that come in and say, we want a LEED Gold building. And I say, no, you don't. You might want a net zero building. Let's talk about that. I push back on it because I think it's our job to. Just like if you had a client that came in and said, I need 5,000 square feet of filing space. Really? How much do you use that filing, really? Right? And let's talk about that. I think we should do the same thing with sustainability. 4th, you need to empower your staff and your team to feel that they can bring up sustainability solutions at every angle and every phase, and they need to push. And therefore, we need to check in at each phase to make them better projects. It can't be a discussion we have at the beginning and it never comes up again. We have to talk about it repeatedly. So we bake in these outcomes, we check in on those outcomes throughout the entire project, all the way through post-occupancy. And then as a little bonus thing, there are 3 questions I want you to just think about vaguely. And you're not in the room, so I can't work you through this, but think about what the metrics are your clients would most love to measure. Not you, but what your clients would most love to measure that would actually ultimately fundamentally help them or their business. 2, think about the data that you'd most want to measure on a completed project. And what would you need to do to either get there or get paid to measure that data? And then 3, what is the one service that you really feel you should offer to your clients that maybe you're not? And I just want to put that out as a form of discussion. If you want to kind of check in, you can text the word green to this cell phone number. This is not my cell phone number. Don't send dick pics to this number. This is not my number. I mean, you can have my number for that, but this is not it. Just text the word green to that number and you'll get an automated response. And then otherwise, if you want to reach out to me, you can do it on Twitter or through email as usual. But otherwise, thank you for listening. I'm sorry that we can't all be together, but I'm really not because you're probably infested with germs. And otherwise, I hope to see you all healthy and alive in the near future. So thank you.